Hey, what's up? My name is Yotam, and welcome to my Solidworks exercises for beginners. Today, in exercise 1.3, we will be practicing the tools that we learned in my first tutorial by creating the Model Mania 2008 part from Solidworks. This part is a lot less technically challenging than the part we created in my previous exercise 1.2, so if you found that exercise a little challenging, this might be closer to your skill level. The reason that is because the entire part can be sketched out on just one plane, and all the features can be created based off of that one sketch. And that way I don't have to worry about making multiple sketches on multiple planes, and overall it's just easier to create. So to get started, let's go to File, New, have Part selected, OK. Alright, so to get started, I'm going to select my top plane, Sketch, select the Circle tool, and I'm just going to start making the basic geometry without worrying too much about any of the dimensions. Select the center point arc slot, which is right here. If you just press on the drop-down menu, you can select it. And then create my slot, just like that. And then I'm going to use the Offset Entities tool to create the offset for the slot. And I'm going to leave the dimension arbitrary for now because we will define that later. So I'm just going to delete that. And then I'm going to add a line from here to here, and an arc, a 3-point arc, if you select that, from here to here. Then I'm going to start adding in some constraints. This has to be horizontal, and make sure that these are also tangent. You can see these little tangent icons here. And same thing on this one. This has to be tangent to both the circle and the slot. And then add some dimensions, so Smart Dimension tool, set this to 35 millimeters, check. Set this to 22 millimeters, and you'll notice that my millimeters are converting into inches here. That's just because I have my default set at inch pound seconds, and if you want to change that, you can go to millimeter gram seconds. I recommend you do that before you start the sketch. I just forgot to change that before I started the sketch, so now this sketch is all in inches. So if I want to have measurements that are in different units, I have to make sure I specify that when I smart dimension it. So select Smart Dimension, continue smart dimensioning these. This is 175 millimeters, that's the radius, and this has a radius of 12 millimeters. This has 6 millimeters. This has a radius of 100 millimeters. And then I need to set the angle between these 2 points. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go over to Line. On the drop-down menu, select Center Line. And now I can create some construction geometry that will allow me to dimension the angle between 2 points. All right. Check Smart Dimension, select these 2 lines, and that should be 30. And then I need to create the cutout that's in the center of this part, so I'm going to use the Offset Entities tool. Select this line, has to be 6 millimeters, check, and I'm going to do the same to the other side. Reverse that, check. And then these endpoints here aren't constrained to anything, so I'm just going to drag them back a little bit so that I can add an arc to the end of them. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the Line tool, select this point, and if I hover my cursor back over the point that I started at the end of the line, then it'll turn it into an arc. And that's just useful because you don't have to go into all these tools over here. And it's automatically tangent, so it's a tangent arc, which is pretty useful. And then just select this point right here, make that tangent as well. I'm going to drag this arc just a bit so that I can now dimension this distance, and that distance, if you hold shift, you can select the circumference of arcs and circles, so I'm going to select those 2, and then that should be 6 millimeters. There we go. So now my sketch is fully defined and I can start applying some features. I'm going to go to Extruded Boss and select this, which has to be 30 millimeters. All right, then I'm going to select this sketch again and create another Extruded Boss feature. Make sure I have these 2 contours selected. and this goes up to 14 millimeters, and it is offset by 2 millimeters. All right, check. And then one more, select this sketch again, extrude. Select this contour. This goes 14 millimeters. Actually, let me double check this. Okay, so this is 16. I might have set that to the wrong measurement. So this is 14, and this should be offset by 3 millimeters. And 14. Make sure you specify millimeters. There we go. Check. And then I'm going to make sure, yeah, I set that to the wrong length, so I'm going to edit this feature and just set this to 16 millimeters. There we go. All right, so now I have to apply some fillets. Let's have a look at where these fillets go. It looks like there's two different types of fillets here. There's two different sizes, rather. There's R2 and R4, and that's just the radius. So the blue fillets have a radius of 2 millimeters, and the red fillets have a radius of 4 millimeters. I'm going to start with the blue fillets just because they cover more ground, and it looks like this red fillet here, you can see because it has multiple faces, it looks like this is added on after a certain fillet. So let's see how this goes. Let's see what order we have to put them in. I'm just going to select this face, whoops, this face, and these as well. Make sure I have them to the correct size, so 2 millimeters, there we go. And then I also have to do these. That seems to break it, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put this in two different fillet features. So that's the first one. And I'm going to go back into fillet. I'm going to select this. Oops, back into fillet. Yep, and that looks correct. And this should also be 2 millimeters. Check. And the last one more fillet. Select these two edges and set this to 4 millimeters. Check. Now I'm just going to double check, make sure that these fillets look correct. If you look at the drawing, you can see that this fillet here has multiple faces. It looks like it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 faces on the ones that we can see. And it looks like my fillet has the same number of faces. And that just has to do with the order. Like you can see, if I drag this fillet up, it might break one of the other fillets. Yeah, it won't let me because it would break one of the other fillets if I did that. See, I just dragged fillet 3 above fillet 2, and it might have changed the number of faces that are on fillet 3. But in this case, it looks to be fine. So that'll be it for the geometry of this part. Now if I'd like to apply some appearances, I can right-click on this, Appearances, and I'm just going to select the fillet, and let's set this fillet to blue because that's what it looks like in the drawing. And I'm also going to select this face here, which will select the other fillet feature over here. Check. Do the same to the red fillet, Appearance, Fillet. Make that red. Check. Then make the body yellow. Appearance, Body. And just select the yellow. Check. Alright, so there's one last thing I have to add to this part before we finish that I forgot to add earlier. So I'm just going to go back to my first sketch, Edit Sketch, Control 8 to select the Normal 2 tool. Alright, so I'm going to go in and select the Rectangle tool just to create the keyway that I forgot to add earlier. And this has a height of 6 millimeters. And this edge, whoops, still need the Smart Dimension tool. This edge, if I select Shift, I can dimension it to the back edge of this circle and make that to 24.5 millimeters. Alright, and then just to make this horizontal with the origin, I need to right-click this line and select midpoint, and then Control and select the origin. Then I can set those 2 points to be horizontal. There we go. And that way, when I go in with the Trim Entities tool to clean up this geometry, none of my relations break, and everything stays fully defined. So now I can exit the sketch, and you'll see the keyway has been created, and that's it for this part. We can check and see that everything that is in this drawing has been created in SolidWorks. So that'll be it for today's exercise. I hope you guys found it helpful. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and leave them in the comments below, and I'll see you guys for the next one.